The hallway smelled like mildew and forgotten mail. The overhead light flickered twice, then gave up, leaving only the gray afternoon glow that crept through the window at the far end of the corridor. It was the kind of building where people kept their doors locked and their voices low, where neighbors nodded but never spoke, where the walls were thin enough to hear arguments but thick enough to pretend you hadn't. Apartment 4C had a door with chipped green paint and a peephole that had been scratched over from the inside, as if someone had once tried to blind it. Behind that door, a woman was teaching her daughter how to count coins on a kitchen table that wobbled unless you folded a piece of cardboard under one leg. The knock came at 4:47 p.m. Not a police knock, not a landlord knock. Something slower. 3 knocks, evenly spaced, patient, like whoever stood on the other side had nowhere else to be, and all the time in the world to wait. Marinveith stopped counting. Her hand moved instinctively to her younger daughter's shoulder, a reflex born from months of flinching at unexpected sounds. Sable, her 8-year-old, looked up from the coins with eyes that had learned too early how to read danger in small details. "Mama," Sable whispered. "Is it him?" Marin didn't answer. She moved toward the door slowly, her socks silent on the cracked linoleum. She pressed her eye to the scratched peephole, but all she could see was a dark shape, broad shoulders, a wool coat the color of charcoal. "Who is it?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. A pause, then a voice, low and unhurried, like gravel smoothed by water. "My name is Cormac Bren. I'm not here to hurt you, but you have something of mine." Marin's hand tightened on the doorknob. She didn't open it. "I don't know anyone by that name. You have the wrong apartment." "I don't." Behind her, 5-year-old Wren had climbed down from the kitchen chair and was walking toward the door with her stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest. She stopped halfway across the room and looked at the door, then at her mother, then at the door again. "Mama," Wren said in her small, clear voice, "if the bad man found us, will he take you away like Daddy said he would?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Marin turned, her face draining of color. She knelt quickly, pulling Wren into her arms, pressing the child's head against her shoulder as if she could muffle the question by holding her close enough. But the man on the other side of the door had heard it. Cormac Bren had been standing with his hand raised, ready to knock again, and now his hand slowly lowered. He had spent nearly 20 years building a reputation that made grown men cross the street to avoid him. He controlled docks and warehouses and men who carried guns without hesitation. He had sat across tables from politicians and judges and never once blinked. But the voice of a 5-year-old asking if the bad man would take her mother away, that sound reached a place in him that no amount of power had ever been able to wall off completely. He took one step back from the door. He could leave. He could send someone else. He could come back another time when the children weren't there. But he didn't leave. Because Cormac Bren had heard that kind of question before. Not from a stranger's child in a rundown apartment building. From himself. From a boy named Cormac who had once stood in a kitchen doorway and asked his mother why she was crying, and whether the bad man would come back tonight. He lowered his voice, speaking toward the crack between the door and the frame. "I'm going to step back. I'm going to sit on the stairs at the end of the hall. You can open the door or not. I'll wait. But I'm not here for the reason you think." Marin listened to the footsteps retreat. She waited 30 seconds, then 40, then a full minute. Then she crept back to the peephole and looked. The man was sitting on the top step of the stairwell, 15 feet away. His hands were resting on his knees, visible and open. He wasn't looking at the door. He was looking at the window, at the gray light falling through the dirty glass, and his face had an expression she hadn't expected. Not anger, not impatience. Something that looked almost like recognition. Sable appeared at Marin's elbow. "Who is he?" "I don't know." "What does he want?" "He says I have something of his." Sable's eyes moved to her mother's neck, to the silver chain that hung there, mostly hidden beneath the collar of her sweater. The locket. "Mama," Sable said slowly, "do we?" Marin's hand moved to her chest without thinking. Her fingers found the locket through the fabric, the small oval shape she had worn for 6 years, the one thing she had that felt like it belonged to her. She had been given that locket by a woman named Delia at a shelter in another city a lifetime ago. Delia had been 70 years old and dying of cancer, and she had pressed the locket into Marin's palm and said, "This kept me safe when nothing else could. Now it's yours." Marin had never opened it. Delia had told her not to, had told her the locket only opened for the person who was meant to see what was inside. Marin had thought it was a superstition, an old woman's fancy. But she had honored the request. She wore it. She held it when she was scared, and she never opened it. Now a stranger had appeared at her door and said she had something of his. And Sable, her 8-year-old daughter who noticed everything and said nothing, was looking at the locket with an expression that made Marin's stomach turn cold. "Stay with your sister," Marin said quietly. "Don't open the door for anyone." "Where are you going?" Marin took a slow breath. "To find out what he wants." Marin Veith had not always been afraid of knocks at the door. There had been a time, it felt like centuries ago, when she was a woman who laughed easily, who left her apartment without checking the street first, who believed that the future was something you walked toward instead of something you ran from. That was before Desmond. She had met him when she was 23, a junior copywriter at a marketing firm in Carvel City. He was handsome in the way that certain men are handsome, the kind of handsome that comes with confidence and good suits, and a smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He had brought her flowers on their second date. He had remembered her coffee order by the 3rd. By the 6th month, he was telling her she didn't need to work anymore, that he would take care of everything, that all she had to do was be his. She had thought it was love. She had thought this was what being chosen felt like. The first time he hit her, they had been married for 4 months. She had come home late from a dinner with a college friend, a dinner she had told him about in advance, and he had been waiting in the kitchen with a bottle of whiskey and a silence that felt like a held breath. "Where were you?" "I told you. Dinner with Blythe. I texted you when I left." "You didn't answer when I called?" "My phone was in my purse. I didn't hear it." The slap came so fast she didn't register it until she was on the floor, her cheek burning, her ears ringing. He stood over her and said, "When I call, you answer." She had told herself it was a one-time thing. He'd been drinking. He apologized the next day with roses and tears and promises. She had believed him because she needed to believe him, because the alternative was admitting that she had married a monster. The second time was 3 weeks later. The third time was 2 weeks after that. By the end of the first year, Marin had learned to read his moods like a sailor reads weather, to adjust her voice and her posture and her very breathing based on the tension in his shoulders. Sable was born in the 2nd year, Wren in the 5th. And somewhere in between, Desmond had systematically dismantled every connection Marin had to the outside world. Her job went first. He said she needed to focus on the family. Then her friends. He said they were a bad influence. Then her sister, pushed away after a fight that Desmond had manufactured so precisely that Marin didn't realize she'd been manipulated until years later. By the time Wren turned 3, Marin had no one, no friends, no family, no money of her own. Just an apartment that felt like a prison, and a husband who controlled every hour of her day, and 2 daughters who had learned to be very, very quiet when Daddy was home. The night she left, Desmond had come home at 11 with whiskey on his breath and a look in his eyes that Marin recognized. She had tried to get the girls to bed early, tried to have everything perfect, tried to make herself invisible. It didn't work. He had found something to be angry about, a dish in the sink. It didn't matter what. and he had grabbed Marin by the throat and shoved her against the hallway wall. But this time, Sable was watching. Sable had come out of her bedroom to get water, and she had stood in the hallway in her pajamas with her cup in her hand, and she had watched her father's hands around her mother's throat, and she had not screamed, had not cried, had not made a single sound. She had just stood there, frozen, memorizing. That was the moment something inside Marin cracked. Not broke, cracked. Because broken meant you couldn't move. And Marin could still move. She waited until Desmond passed out on the couch. Then she packed a bag she had hidden in the back of the closet. Clothes, documents, $300 she had stolen from his wallet in small amounts over 8 months. And she carried Ren on her hip and held Sable's hand and walked out of the house at 2 in the morning without shoes on. That was 11 weeks ago. 11 weeks of shelters that were full, motels paid in cash, gas station meals, sleeping in the car with the seats reclined as far as they would go. 11 weeks of keeping the girls quiet and calm and believing that Mama had everything under control. The locket had been her talisman through all of it. When she couldn't sleep, she held it. When the girls asked questions she couldn't answer, she touched it through her shirt and remembered Delia's voice. This kept me safe when nothing else could. Now she stood at her apartment door with her hand on the deadbolt and a stranger's words echoing in her head. You have something of mine. She slid the deadbolt back. She opened the door 6 inches, leaving the chain on. Through the gap she could see him still sitting on the stairs. He turned his head when the door opened, and his eyes met hers. Gray-green eyes. A face that looked like it had been carved from stone and then weathered by decades of wind. A thin scar along his jaw that she hadn't noticed before. I'm listening, Marin said. You have 2 minutes. Cormac Bren did not stand up. He had learned, in the years since he became the kind of man whose name made people nervous, that standing when a frightened woman expected you to sit was a way of confirming every fear she already had. So he stayed where he was, hands still on his knees, posture deliberately slack. The locket you're wearing, he said. Silver. Oval. A small dent on the left side, near the hinge. Marin's hand went to her chest again. She hadn't taken the locket out. She hadn't shown it to him. But he had described it exactly. How do you know about this? Because it belonged to my mother. The words landed like stones in still water. Marin stared at him through the 6-inch gap in the door, waiting for him to continue. Her name was Bridget, Cormac said. She died 19 years ago. The locket was hers, a gift from her grandmother. She wore it every day of her life until the last 3 months, when she gave it to someone at a shelter in Dunmore. She told me she'd given it to a woman who needed it more than she did. She didn't tell me the woman's name. She just said the locket would find its way to whoever was supposed to have it. He paused. His jaw tightened, then released. I've been looking for it for 6 years. Not because it's valuable, because it's the only thing of hers I don't have. The only thing I never got to hold. Marin felt the weight of the locket against her skin. She thought of Delia, the old woman at the shelter who had pressed it into her palm. Delia, who had been 70 and dying. Delia, who had said she'd carried it for 13 years and it was time to pass it on. If Cormac's mother had died 19 years ago, and Delia had carried it for 13, the math worked. The chain was unbroken. How do I know you're telling the truth? Marin asked. You don't, but you can open the locket. The woman who gave it to me said not to open it. She was respecting my mother's wishes. My mother believed the locket should only be opened by the person who needed to see what was inside. He looked at Marin with those gray-green eyes. I think you're that person. I think that's why you have it. Marin was silent for a long moment. The hallway hummed with the distant sound of a television somewhere on another floor. You could have just taken it, she said finally. You could have broken down this door. Yes. But you didn't. No. Why? Cormac looked at her. For the first time, something in his expression shifted. A crack in the stone, a glimpse of something underneath. Because my mother didn't raise that kind of man, even if I became one. The silence that followed was the kind that changes conversations, the kind that tells you something true has been said. Marin studied him through the gap in the door. She had become an expert at reading men, at reading the difference between the ones who offered something and the ones who demanded it. She didn't find a lie in his face. "Your mother," Marin said slowly. "How did she die?" Cormac's hands tightened slightly on his knees. She didn't die from an illness. She died from living with one. My father. He wasn't sick in the way doctors could treat. He was sick in the way that makes a man think his fists are the answer to every question. Marin's breath caught. "She protected me from him for 14 years, Cormac continued. "She took every hit so I wouldn't have to. She worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on because he drank every paycheck she didn't hide. And when I was old enough to fight back, when I finally put myself between him and her, he left. But by then her body had already been used up. The shelter, the one where she gave away the locket, that was the last place she went before the hospital. She knew she was dying. She wanted to give something away that might help someone else survive the thing she didn't." He looked up at Marin. "I heard your daughter through the door. I heard what she asked you. About the bad man. About whether he would take you away." Marin said nothing. Her throat had tightened. "I asked my mother the same kind of question once," Cormac said. "I was 6 years old. I asked her if the bad man was going to kill her. She told me no. She told me everything was going to be fine. She lied because that's what mothers do when they're trying to protect their children from the truth." He stood up slowly, deliberately, keeping his hands visible. "I didn't come here to take the locket from you. I came here because I've spent 6 years looking for a piece of my mother, and when I finally found it, it was around the neck of a woman hiding in a building like this, with children who ask questions like that." He reached into his coat pocket. Marin stiffened, but what he pulled out was only a card. Plain white. A phone number written in black ink. He walked toward the door slowly and slid the card through the gap. "If you ever need help, any kind of help, that number reaches a man named Keene. He works for me. He doesn't ask questions. He just solves problems." Marin looked at the card but didn't pick it up. "I don't want your help. I don't know you." "I know. That's why I'm leaving it there instead of pushing it into your hand. The choice is yours. It always should be." He turned toward the stairs. "Wait," Marin said. He stopped. "The locket. You came all this way. You spent 6 years. Don't you want it back?" Cormac was quiet for a moment. Then he turned his head, just enough to look at her over his shoulder. "My mother gave it away for a reason. She believed it would find the person who needed it. I think it did." He paused. "Keep it. Open it when you're ready. Maybe whatever's inside will help you the way it helped her." He walked down the stairs. His footsteps echoed in the hollow stairwell, growing fainter with each floor. Marin stood in the doorway for a long time after the sound disappeared. Then she bent down and picked up the card. Behind her, Sable's voice came from the kitchen. "Mama, who is that man?" Marin closed the door. She slid the deadbolt into place. "I don't know yet," she said. But somewhere deep in her chest, in the place where instinct lives and logic cannot reach, she felt something shift. Not trust. Not yet. But the first faint suggestion that maybe, for the first time in 11 weeks, she wasn't completely alone. 3 days passed. Marin kept the card in the drawer beside her bed. She told herself she would throw it away. She told herself she didn't need help from a stranger, especially one whose name she had looked up on her phone and discovered was connected to words like organized crime and alleged and under investigation. Cormac Bren was not a good man. The internet made that clear. But the internet couldn't explain why a man like that had sat on a staircase with his hands visible, why he had walked away without taking what he came for. On the third night, Ren woke up screaming. It was 2:17 a.m. Marin was in Ren's bed before the second scream, pulling her daughter into her arms. Shh, shh. I'm here. Mama's here. He was at the window. Ren sobbed. Daddy was looking in. He said he was going to take you away. Marin held her tighter. She rocked her the way she had when Ren was an infant. Back and forth. Back and forth. Sable was awake too. She was sitting up in her bed on the other side of the room, watching. Mama, Sable said quietly, Ren's been having that dream every night. Every night? She doesn't want to scare you. She makes me promise not to tell. The sentence hit Marin like a stone. She looked at her 8-year-old daughter, her daughter who had learned to carry secrets to protect her mother, and she felt something shift inside her chest. She settled Ren back into bed, singing softly until the child's breathing evened out. Then she walked to the kitchen and stood at the window, looking out at the dark courtyard below. Desmond was out there somewhere. She could feel it the way you feel a storm coming. He was looking for her. He wouldn't stop. Men like him never stopped. She reached into the drawer and pulled out the card. Then she picked up her phone. Keen arrived at the apartment at 8:30 the next morning. He was not what Marin expected. She had imagined someone large and intimidating. Instead, Keen was slight, soft-spoken, with wire-rimmed glasses and the demeanor of a librarian. Mrs. Vieth, he said at the door, I'm here to take you somewhere safe. There will be food for the children. They followed him to a place called Thornberry's, a stone building with ivy climbing up the front on a quiet street. Inside, a woman named Atili led Sable and Ren to a back room with promises of hot chocolate. Cormac Bren was sitting at a table by the window. Thank you for coming, he said when she sat down. I didn't come for you. I came because my daughter has nightmares every night and I'm running out of ways to make them stop. Cormac nodded. Tell me. And Marin did. She told him about Desmond, about the first slap, about the escalation, about the isolation, the systematic removal of every friend and family member until she was alone with a man who controlled every hour of her existence. She told him about the night she left, about Sable standing frozen in the hallway, about 11 weeks of running. And then she told him the part she hadn't told anyone. He found me once already, 6 weeks ago, in a town called Ridgefield. I saw him through the motel window, walking toward our door. We went out the bathroom window and drove all night. Her hands were trembling. He's connected. His brother is a police officer. His cousin works for the county clerk. I pay cash for everything, but he found me once, and he'll find me again. Cormac was silent for a long moment. Then he asked, What do you need? I need to stop being afraid. The words came out before she could stop them. Cormac nodded slowly. I know a woman. Her name is Verity Ashford. She's an attorney, the kind that doesn't lose. She handles cases like yours. If anyone can build a wall between you and your husband, it's her. I can't afford an attorney. She's on retainer. My retainer. You're not taking anything. I'm making a phone call. What you do with the opportunity is your choice. The distinction mattered. Marin heard it. Why? She asked. I still don't understand why you're doing this. Because my mother would have wanted me to. Cormac's voice was steady, but something underneath it was not. She survived 22 years with my father. She survived beatings and broken bones. She survived all of it so I could have a chance. And then she died, and I couldn't save her. And I spent the next 19 years becoming the kind of man she would have been ashamed of. He looked down at his hands. I can't go back and save my mother. But maybe I can help you. Maybe that's what the locket was trying to tell me. Marin looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached up and unclasped the locket from her neck. I think it's time to open it. You said your mother wanted it opened by the person who was supposed to see what's inside. Maybe that's both of us. Slowly, carefully, she pressed the tiny clasp. The locket opened. Inside there were two things. On the left, a photograph. Faded, small. A young woman with dark hair and gray-green eyes holding a baby wrapped in a white blanket. On the right, a folded slip of paper so old it was nearly translucent. Cormac stared at the photograph. His jaw tightened. His eyes glistened. That's her, he said quietly. That's my mother. And that's me. Maren unfolded the slip of paper. The handwriting was faded but legible. She read it aloud. To whoever holds this locket, you are not alone. You are stronger than you know. And somewhere in this world, there is a door that will open for you. Keep walking. Keep fighting. Keep believing. The darkness does not last forever. Brigid. The silence that followed was full of years and grief, and something that felt almost like hope. Cormac reached out and touched the edge of the photograph with one finger. His hand was trembling. 19 years, he said. I've been looking for this for 19 years. Maren finished for him. And it says we're supposed to keep walking. The safe house was a brownstone on a quiet street lined with maple trees. Blue door, brass knocker, window boxes full of chrysanthemums. Keene handed her a key and a piece of paper with 3 phone numbers. First number is Verity. Second is me. Third is Mr. Bren, if you ever need him directly. The apartment was warm. It smelled like lemon polish. The kitchen had food in it. Bread, peanut butter, milk, eggs, and a bowl of apples on the counter. The refrigerator was stocked. Wren stood in front of it with the door open, staring. Mama, she said, there's juice boxes. I see that. Can I have one? You can have 2. Wren's face lit up with a joy so pure that Maren had to turn away to hide her tears. 2 juice boxes. That was all it took. That night, for the first time in 11 weeks, Maren slept in a bed. Not sitting up in a car seat. Not on a shelter cot. A real bed. She didn't sleep well. She hadn't slept well in years. But she slept. And when she woke at 3 a.m. out of habit, she listened to the silence and realized there was nothing to listen for. No footsteps, no raised voices, no car pulling into the driveway. Just silence, just the radiator clicking softly. She lay in the dark and cried. Verity Ashford called at 8:47 the next morning. Her voice was crisp, professional, and warm where warmth was needed. She asked Maren to tell her everything, and Maren did. I need you to write down every incident you can remember, Verity said. Every hit, every threat, and every time you went to a hospital or should have. I also need the names of anyone who might have seen bruises. There was a nurse at the ER once, 3 years ago. Gretchen. She looked at me like she knew I was lying. I'll find her. ERs keep records. Verity paused. Maren, your husband filed a missing persons report 2 days after you left. He told the police you were mentally unstable and had taken the children without consent. He's framed this as a kidnapping. Maren's blood went cold. Can he do that? He can file whatever he wants. Making it stick is different. That's where I come in. Verity's voice hardened. I've dealt with men like your husband before. They use the system as a weapon. But you have resources now, and I don't lose. 3 days later, Cormac appeared at Thornberry's again. Your mother's note, Maren said. She wrote it for a stranger. Someone she would never meet. Why? Cormac looked out the window. She believed in what she called the long thread. The idea that every action sends a ripple forward through time. That kindness given today might not pay off tomorrow or next year, but someday, somewhere, it would matter to someone. And you, do you believe that? I want to. I've spent most of my adult life doing things that suggest the opposite. But the older I get, the more I think my mother was right. The fear I've built, the empire, the reputation, none of it brought her back. He looked at Marin. I can't go back and save my mother. But maybe I can help you. Maybe that's the door I'm supposed to open. Marin reached into her bag and pulled out a piece of paper. Ren drew this yesterday. She asked me to give it to the man who bought her hot chocolate. Cormac unfolded the paper slowly. A drawing in crayon. 3 figures in front of a building with a blue door. 2 small figures holding hands. 1 larger figure with yellow hair. A sun with rays extending in all directions. Underneath, in shaky letters, Safe House. Cormac stared at the drawing. His jaw tightened. His eyes glistened. He didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he folded the paper carefully and put it in his coat pocket. Thank you, he said. His voice was rough. The next 4 weeks moved like a river finding its course. Verity filed the emergency protective order. A judge reviewed the documentation, hospital records, the ER nurse's notes, school counselor reports about Sable's anxiety. The order was granted within 72 hours. Desmond Veith was served at his home. The order prohibited him from coming within 500 feet of Marin or the children. The missing persons report was flagged for review, and investigators quietly closed the file. A new file was opened, one with Desmond's name on it. 8 weeks after Cormac knocked on her door, Marin and the girls moved into a new apartment. 2 bedrooms on the east side of the city, oak trees on the street, a superintendent named Harold who called everyone friend. Sable walked in first. She stood in the center of the living room and turned in a slow circle. Is this ours? Yes. For real? For real. Sable walked to the door. She looked at the lock, at the deadbolt, at the chain. Can I lock it? You can always lock it. Sable reached up and turned the deadbolt. She slid the chain into place. She stood there for a moment with her hands on the metal, feeling the weight of it. Then she turned around and smiled. Not the cautious smile she had worn for months. A real smile, the kind that starts at the mouth and doesn't stop until it reaches somewhere deeper. Somewhere in the chest where trust lives, or where trust begins to rebuild. Ren had already found the bedroom. Mama, there's a window. Can I have the bed by the window? You can have whichever bed you want. I want to see the trees when I wake up. 10 weeks later. A Saturday afternoon in early December. The first snow was falling. Marin sat at the kitchen table writing a letter. Cream-colored paper, heavy, the kind you bought for occasions that mattered. The letter was to Bridget. Dear Bridget, I never met you, but I know you. I know you through the locket you carried. I know you through the note you left inside it. I know you through your son, who carries your grief like a stone he can't put down. You wrote that I wasn't alone. For 6 years I held those words without understanding them. Now I understand. You couldn't save yourself. But you saved me. You saved my daughters. You reached across 19 years and held out your hand. And when I finally took it, everything changed. The circle kept turning. You gave to Delia. Delia gave to me. And someday, I will give to someone else. The long thread continues. Thank you for believing in doors. The darkness didn't last forever. With gratitude, Marin Shi folded the letter and sealed it in an envelope. She wrote Bridget on the front. Then she tucked it into the drawer beside her bed. That afternoon, Marin took the girls to a coffee shop 3 blocks from the apartment. Hot chocolate for Ren, a scone for Sable, a cup of coffee for Marin that she actually drank now. Sable looked up from her book. Mama, I got invited to a birthday party. Do you want to go? Sable was quiet. I think so. But I'm scared. Of what? Of being normal? Is that weird? Marin reached across the table and put her hand on Sable's. No. Normal feels strange when you haven't had it in a while. But it adds up. One day at a time. Okay, Sable said. I'll go. Wren looked up from her napkin. I want to go to a party too. Sable rolled her eyes. You always want cake. Cake is good. You're good, Sable said, and poked her sister gently in the arm. Wren giggled. The sound filled the coffee shop like sunlight. Across the street, a dark car idled at the curb. Inside it, Cormac Bren sat with his hands on the steering wheel, looking at the coffee shop through the falling snow. He could see the shapes of a woman and two children at a table by the glass. He could see the younger girl waving a crayon. He could see the older girl laughing. In his coat pocket he could feel the folded paper Wren had drawn, the three figures, the blue door, the sun, the words, safe house. He had carried it every day for 10 weeks. His mother had believed in circles, in giving and receiving, in doors that opened for people who kept walking. For 19 years, Cormac had thought the door he was supposed to open was the one that led to power, to control. Now he understood. The door had never been for him. It had been for a woman in apartment 4C who had run out of places to run. For two children who asked questions no children should have to ask. And Cormac's only job had been to stand on the other side and hold it open. He put the car in drive. He did not look back. The snow continued to fall, covering the city in white. In an apartment on the east side, a deadbolt waited in its locked position, faithful and secure. In a drawer beside a bed, a letter addressed to a dead woman rested beside a child's drawing. And around the neck of a woman who had stopped running, a silver locket hung warm against her skin, holding a photograph and a note and a promise that had traveled 19 years to reach her. You are not alone. You are stronger than you know. Keep walking. Maren Veith was walking, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she knew where she was going. Home.